YouTube, active. WhatsApp, Clubhouse, settings, Tap X, phone. Amazon, settings, Amazon, phone, JD, Disold, Nature, TV, Big Ben, GarageBand. Landscape. Home button to the right. GarageBand, loading my song 11. You mean verticals? Okay, button. Navigation, button. Monster, robot, dreamy, button, bull, tele, expert, chipmunk, seat, out, pitch, space, channel, monitor, on, button, monitor, off. Monitor, on. Monitor, off. Monitor, on. Monitor, off.
S20E25.
From our earliest days, we've gathered around the fire for warmth and comfort. But beyond the light of the dying embers, there is the darkness. And it's in the darkness of the night where we find ourselves, waiting, yearning for the dawn to banish our fears. But our campfire holds more than firelight. For with us, you will hear the tales that make the nightmares engulf you. And you'll dare not close your eyes. Brace yourself for the No Sleep Podcast.
Welcome to the No Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, David Cummings. We've come to the end of the line. The terminal approaches. Time to go off the rails, as it were. Yes, our 20th season wraps up with the finale. We're on track for 2 tales, which will hopefully bring the horror and give you a kick in the caboose. But first, I want to share some news with everyone. If you follow us on the socials, you'll have seen us hint at this big news already. But it's time to let everyone know about an exciting new series the No Sleep Podcast is a part of. It's called Tales from the Void, and it will be streaming this fall. It's a series of screen adaptations of horror stories from the No Sleep subreddit. And of the first season's 6 stories, 4 of them were featured on the podcast over the years. Included are stories from fan favorites Rebecca Klingel, aka C.K. Walker, Manon Lysette, and Matt Demersky. And I'm very proud to be an executive producer on this project, and you might even see me on screen as I host a short post-episode interview segment with the authors. Fans in the US can see the show streaming on Screambox, and in Canada it will appear on Super Channel. And don't worry, we're working hard on securing international streaming providers. We'll be sharing more about Tales from the Void as the spooky season approaches. But for now, you can check the link in the show notes to go to the Tales from the Void website. So, brace yourself to take the plunge into the void with us. Now, let's talk about the season finale. As you may have deduced from my opening remarks, the stories this week are trained on traveling down the tracks. Yes, trains. For some, a bit of an anachronistic form of travel. Some of you might commute by train, be it commuter trains or subways. Others of you may have never gone on a train journey. And yet trains seem to be steeped in horror traditions. Ghost trains, dark tunnels, abandoned tracks holding sinister spirits. It seems trains hold a special spooky place in our horror-loving hearts. We love horror trains so much, we might just be making them the theme of an upcoming season. Yeah, maybe. But before we begin this free, full-length finale, we need to introduce you to a new sponsor. And who they are might shock you. Here at the No Sleep Podcast, we do our best to scare you sleepless. But for those times when you simply must sleep, why not do it in the most comfortable way? with some cool ghosts. Yes, when it comes to getting a great sleep, we really love the folks at Ghost Bed. As a family-owned company with over 20 years of experience, Ghost Bed knows a thing or two about crafting the perfect mattress. They use only the most durable, supportive, and long-lasting materials, so you can trust that your bed will provide you with years of excellent sleep. For me, I need a nice cool bed and mattress to sleep on. What's signature and patented cooling technology? Say goodbye to those restless, sweaty nights. Every mattress keeps you cool and comfortable, so you can sleep like a dream. When you purchase a Ghost Bed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. With their 101
C5 and 70 out pitch space 100% of channel white dim space 9 80 80 7 7 6 6 50 50 45% 40% 30 30 20 20 15 10%
Number one seller is
5% 0%.
Lux, designed with premium memory foam and cutting-edge cooling technology that reacts and adjusts to your body heat as you sleep.
5 10% 15 20 25 30 30 40%
With both foam
45
and
50% 55 60 65%
Flex Hybrid for the perfect
70 7 80 80 90 90 100 100 100%.
Assistance along the way. Ghost Bed has a team of dedicated, no sleep experts ready to help you find the perfect mattress. They'll guide you through the options and ensure you make the best choice for your needs. So, ready for a more comfortable night of sleep? Visit ghostbed.com/nosleep. And because we love scary good deals, use the code NOSLEEP to save 50% off your purchase site-wide. That's only 50%. So, thanks to Ghost Bed for allowing us to share this full-length episode for free. Now, back to the campfire. So, dear sleepless listeners, we thank you for being with us around the campfire during Season 20. We look forward to giving you April showers of horror before we kick off Season 21 at the start of May. And now, for the last time, the sun has set, the fire glows bright. Brace yourself for the darkness of the night. In our first tale, we meet a group of boys who travel down some train tracks in hopes of seeing a dead body. Oh, wait a minute. No, wrong story. Sorry. I think that King fellow did that one. No. In this tale, the boys learn of a legend in their town. The legend of a ghost train that can be seen only at night in a certain spot. And as we'll learn from author Kenyon Sanford, the experience the boys have will leave a lasting impact on all of them. Performing this tale are Dan Zapulak, Ellie Hirschman, Matthew Bradford, and Kyle Akers. So think twice before you go out into the dark to see a spectral legend, especially if you seek the Midnight Special.
I guess it started in the Thunderdome. The Atkins Elementary School had a dome-shaped monkey bar set, and our gang agreed to call it the Thunderdome after a movie only Jim had seen when his father brought it home from Blockbuster and allowed him to watch it once because, quote, this one was PG-13, and that means it's okay. By 5th grade, the hour you had outdoors after lunch was mostly spent talking to your friends. We sat in the bars inside the bars and talked, mostly about movies or TV we liked. Or sometimes we became literary and discussed comic books. Fridays, however, were a little different. We still did the same thing, but Friday afternoons outside were the best because it was like Christmas Eve every week, when the anticipation of the weekend, like an unwrapped gift, was sweeter than having it. Anticipation was intangible, and it never disappointed. You never needed to wait to hold anticipation because it was already there. When they say the journey is better than the destination, I tend to agree, unless the destination is the beach, or the journey is by bus. That Friday afternoon, we discussed scary movies we liked. Jurassic Park worked. It had come out a few years before we were in the 5th grade, but we still shared books on dinosaurs and agreed we should all have a healthy interest in cloning, considering we would be dealing with it soon. Maybe 10 or so years on, Jim finally stopped talking about how The Lost World was not as good as the first movie, and then Elliot spoke the words that started it all.
Y'all want to hear about something really scary?
We all shook our heads yes, because being scared was our favorite pastime. When you are 10 or 12 years old, you still get scared by monsters because you don't know that life will be much worse than ghouls and slimy things lurking inside a video cassette. Not yet.
I heard about something I think is gonna really scare you guys.
Jim cocked an eyebrow.
Yeah, what is it?
They call it the Midnight Special.
Elliot had heard it from his dad, who had heard it when he was our age from another kid, just as these things go. Turns out, the northern border of Atkins, Texas, was where the old railroad tracks that kept the produce and cattle moving from the east in Georgia all the way out to Southern California crossed on their way west. Sometime in the 40s, which I imagine had something to do with World War II, as all things in the 40s did, they outfitted the trains to take prisoners out west in the evening shifts. So, during the midnight hour, you might hear the train roll through and tap the outskirts of town. And if you listened hard, you might hear the cries of lonely men being taken to prison. Many of these men might be taken to the gas chamber real quick after that. At least, that was the story. But I'm not sure what it had to do with what comes next. Fast forward a couple dozen years, and these particular tracks don't carry trains out west. Not with produce, not with cattle, not with men of any kind. Now, nothing crosses the tracks but green weeds, choking the lines and delivering the area back to Mother Nature as best it can. The tracks remain, the wood cracked and looking like a ladder that never was set upright. Nothing goes down the line, at least not officially. Some say, as all these stories tend to promise, that if you go out to the tracks around midnight and you look to the tunnel that feeds out the tracks, you'll see a train. It's blue, but it also isn't. You can see it, but you can also see right through it. The locomotive has a conductor just like you saw in the cartoons. He wears a big hat, and his skin is shrink-wrapped around the bones of his face. If he sees you watching, he points right at you and opens his mouth, and there are bugs and light inside, begging to be freed. Then he laughs for as long as the train rolls by you. The train is empty, just a long line of flat pallets with no cars on top, except for one. Right in the middle of the length of the train, there's a storage car, and the doors are wide open. You can see in. You can look right inside, and what you'll see is the future. Your future. Right there, in blue and nothing, is your future. And you'll know the rest of your life because the Midnight Special rolled through and looked right back at you. And you'll hear the laugh of the conductor the entire snaking length of the train and for the rest of your life.
What a load of bull.
Elliot shrugged.
Maybe, but only one way to find out.
Christopher was eating a payday, but when Elliot began the story, he had been eating a Kit Kat. He kept his legs crisscrossed applesauce, and his knees didn't reach the end of his shorts, so he looked like nothing but ankles and shins. You mean going there at midnight? Elliot nodded, grinning.
That's just what I mean, Chris. I say we go out there at midnight and see the train for ourselves.
My dad won't take me. He never lets us stay out past 9. Even when he and my mom go out, they always come back by 9. He hates being out late.
Elliot tossed a stick at Jim.
We're not going with our dads, dummy. We'll sneak out and go by ourselves.
I don't want to sneak out. My dad will kill me. My mom might kill me too, which means I'll be double dead. You don't come back from that, Elliot.
Don't be caught, man. Come on. Do they check your room every night?
We all shrugged. Atkins was a homey sort of town. we were all pretty cozy in our southern suburb lives. All of us still had our parents. Most of us had siblings. We all thought we wouldn't last for much, and we were still too young to go around feeling our oats.
You guys suck. My dad snuck out to see it when he was our age. This could be so much fun. Come on.
Elliot kept casting, but none of us were biting. Elliot might have been ready to go against his parents' wishes, but in the 5th grade, the rest of us weren't. No, we weren't sneaking out to see a ghost train. The ironic part about the whole thing was that the ghost train wasn't what ended up scaring me. It took a couple years, but we reached the end of middle school, and since it felt like we might never see each other again, Elliot convinced us we were ready.
It's now or never, guys. Let's go.
Recess and a playground had been replaced by bleacher seats in the gymnasium during lunch hour. Jim had Hot Pockets, which always grossed me out. Chris, he dropped the toker once we were in middle school, along with about 50 pounds. Pod had a salad. I was working on a cold turkey sandwich I brought from home, while Elliot worked us over. He stood while the rest of us sat, moving his hands around like Nixon making his own case. Elliot turned out to be more successful.
Elliot, why do you want to go see a ghost train? We're grown up now. We're 14. We don't believe in that stuff.
Jim, you still watch horror movies like every night. Not even good ones. I thought you'd be as stoked as anyone to go see it.
Jim looked up from his pepperoni paste kolache, that's what they look like to me, and squinted his eyes to Elliot.
What are you talking about, not even good ones?
Elliot shrugged him off.
You're telling me Children of the Corn 3 Urban Harvest is cinema to you? You're going to tell me it's good?
I'm a completionist.
And we love that about you. So let's complete this adventure we've been talking about for years.
Chris piped up, dropping his fork into his salad. He had made good choices, lost his weight, and looked pretty good now. But no matter what face he put on for us, we all knew he hated those salads he had for lunch. Still, he liked the looks from the girls enough to keep him going. He went from the young pudgy kid to the most handsome in our group, and we were all really proud of him. And, I must admit, a little jealous.
I don't have anything else going on.
Elliot pumped his fist and pointed at Chris.
That's the spirit.
When are we talking about doing this? Like, what night? I just need to ask my parents.
No, man, don't ask your parents. It's more fun this way.
Why wouldn't I ask my parents? I know they'll say it's okay, so I have nothing to gain from not telling them. Plus, plenty to lose.
Because if you tell your parents, then they'll know. And if my stepdad asks your parents where we've been, he won't be happy.
Yeah, okay. I guess.
I figured if my parents did find me sneaking in, I'd tell them the truth and hope for the best. I was always on my best behavior, and if I shrugged it off as something I thought was a little embarrassing because it was childish, they'd probably be okay with it. Jim was still stewing about the bad movies comment. He took film, for whatever reason, personally. He finished one of the Hot Pockets and bit into the next, ham and cheese, as if it actually were, before he spoke next.
I don't know, man. Why does it matter? It's just a silly story.
Elliot looked at Jim, his hands no longer telling the story along with his words. His eyes were accenting his speech now.
Because, Jim. Because. Because we never did it when we were kids. Because we're gonna be leaving for high school soon. And because I've got nothing else to do. That good enough?
Good enough for me.
Chris seemed genuine, not just humoring Elliot.
Sure. Okay, but you have to watch the next Children of the Corn movie with me.
Elliot pumped his fist again and pointed at Jim.
That will not happen. But we can watch something. Something maybe...
Elliot moved his hands, flat like blades and parallel to the floor, and danced his fingers around.
Something with ghosts.
We all tossed something at Elliot. Napkins, salad leaves, empty Hot Pocket sleeves. He took it in good humor. We waited for Friday. We met at the gas station headed out of town around 11 at night. I told my parents I was headed to bed early, around 10. They believed me because most nights I spent in my room around 8 to 10 anyway, working on my short stories. I had been sending them out and even received my first rejection letters. I was becoming a better writer and I enjoyed it, so I kept working even when nothing was being published. I just kept telling myself, this is just the way it is now. Keep working, keep working, keep working. The rejection slips made me feel like I was in the game at a young age, so I never felt too bad about it. I carried a paperback in my back pocket like I did everywhere I went, and still do. Testament by David Morrell. Good book, but a downer. Jim told us he left home around 9 and told his parents he was going to stay with Chris. Jim ended up at Chris's house, dropped his bag in the bedroom upstairs, and they snuck out together down the pipe outside of the second story. My parents had gone to bed at 10, so all I had to do was not make any noise headed out our front door. Elliot never talked about home much anymore since his stepdad moved in, so to hear that his parents weren't home and he went out the front door was the most we had known about his home life in a couple of years. We walked out to the edge of town and came to the tracks a half hour before midnight. Jim had a pocket full of Slim Jims. I liked those, actually. And Chris had the first candy bar any of us had seen him with since the 5th grade.
What? It's Friday. I like to treat myself.
We all thought that was a good idea. For some reason, it made us feel better about the whole thing. I sat with Elliot over at a tree, a few feet from the tracks. The tracks only came around one corner on the northeast part of Atkins. A tunnel on the right that came through Rook Hill spit out the tracks that curved around the border of Atkins and lasted for another half mile, before another tunnel took the tracks into Grover's Pass and near Silver Lake and past the Carter County boundary. We were all about halfway between the two tunnels, so the train, we all talked about it like it would happen, not like it should, would pass right by us and give us plenty of time to see it coming and going. The night sky looked like a satin sheet pulled taut, the stars bright like pinpricks in the fabric. The stars, like everywhere I guess, went dimmer as the years went by in the town proper. But out near the edge of Carter County, they've always been as bright as that night. When I look at the stars now, I often think back to the night when we finally learned that we would grow old. I talked to Elliot under the tree, while Jim and Chris competed to see who could throw rocks the farthest. I still wasn't satisfied with his answers on why the Midnight Special was so important to him. Why, after years of moving from adolescence to our early teenage years, he never gave up hope to go see it. He recited the same stuff he had said at that lunch hour, but it didn't convince me so well, like warming up last night's supper in the microwave, and it never tasting as sweet. He never did give me an answer I liked, but I think I figured it out after he was gone. Chris's digital Timex went off at 11:55, enough time for us to be ready. They put down their rocks, and Elliot and I stood up, myself knocking off the leaves still clinging to my 505 blue jeans. We gathered around the center of the tracks, where it came closest to the town in the parabola between tunnels. We stood there, and no one said a word. No one dared to. Out of the corner of my eyes, I saw Chris check his watch.
5 minutes late, boys.
Train's going on.
Elliot was looking down at the center of the tracks, not at either tunnel. As if on cue, we felt it. I remember the rumble in my toes, working its way through my shins and up to my shoulders, slowly, like molasses creeping backwards into a tree. The ground shook for a minute or more before I heard anything, but then I did, coming from my right. I still had my doubts about the Midnight Special. until I heard the faint sound of a train whistle. Suddenly, the tunnel was lit so bright, I would have believed it if you told me there was a bonfire inside. But it was blue. The light poured out of the tunnel, and the face of a large train appeared. It didn't look like a modern train, but like one I had seen in this movie, The Train Robbers, where John Wayne takes gold off a black locomotive for Aunt Margaret. This train was not black, but blue, but only where the outlines of the train would have been. The rest was there, but it also wasn't. I couldn't quite see through the train, but I couldn't quite see the whole thing either. The wheels turned, and it came right towards us. I looked over at Jim and Chris, but they didn't see me. They just kept looking at the train. I looked at Elliot, and he looked back at me just for a second, and we both turned our attention back to the train. By now, it was within 50 yards of us, and I started to make out the conductor. Elliot was right. The conductor saw us watching him, and I swear he made eye contact only with me. But the rest of the guys would probably tell you the same thing. His hat was comically large, with vertical stripes of blue and nothing. His skin was pulled tight around his skull, as though another person was behind and had grabbed the excess fat, pulling as hard as they could. What I had not heard was that he would not have eyes, but just sunken caves where they should have been, with dark caverns where the pupils might be hiding. The caverns looked right at us, if they could look, and then the conductor pulled up his hand. The skin so tight you could see the individual digits of bones in the fingers, and pointed. He dropped back the top of his head, while his bottom jaw stayed stock still, and inside his mouth lived the only genuine light around. I did not see bugs, but I heard the most terrifying laugh crawl out of his mouth like a man writhing out of quicksand. I still hear the laugh. The conductor's car pulled past us, and we all stood watching it as it moved from our right to our left. Suddenly, we were looking at nothing as the empty flat cars moved into our view. I shook my head, tried without success to clear it, and looked to my right, seeing only the blue and nothing flats coming out of the tunnel. Then, a new car came out and clambered down to us, followed by nothing but more flat cars. At this point, I don't remember what I was thinking. I simply waited until the storage car pulled in front of me. Once the open storage doors were directly in front of me, I lost all sense of the universe. I was overtaken in a swarm of blue light and no longer stood on green grass covered by night. Instead, I was standing on a wood-paneled floor, looking at a brown chestnut desk. On the bureau was a computer screen, and the words I could read, they were being typed, I could see them being typed, were simply, "The end." I panned my vision over to the left, and a stack of thick hardcover books with my name along the spine, in different vibrant colors like a rainbow that only moved vertically. To the right was a framed photograph of a man, a woman, and beautiful children. The man looked a little like my dad, but that wasn't my mother, and none of those kids, 3 boys, 2 girls, were me. I only had a glimpse at the room with the desk, with the books and with the photograph, but I desperately wanted to live there. Never having considered before what my future life might look like, I knew instantly that this was what I wanted. As soon as the thought crossed my mind that I would never want to leave, I was sucked back into reality, or what passed for reality that night. I was looking at the car headed to my left, and the doors closed by themselves as it departed from view. The train kept rolling until it finally disappeared into the tunnel, with a final flash of cobalt light and the final echoes of the conductor's laugh echoing off the walls of my head. We stood for a while, no one saying anything. I kicked dirt in front of me, not because I wanted to, but because I felt compelled to do something. Elliot was the first to speak.
Let's go home, guys.
We did. I first learned that Elliot passed away from Jim. After middle school ended that summer, Jim and I stayed at Atkins High School. Chris was taken out to go to a school his parents had hopes might end with a football scholarship. It did, and Elliot's stepdad moved them away when he lost his job at the aluminum chair factory. We lost touch, the way old friends always seem to do. The funeral was light in attendance. It was in Dallas, 10 or 12 miles from the Galleria where he jumped off. Jim said he saw pictures from the scene, and they made him cry. I didn't need the photos to cry. I did it all by myself, before I even made it into the funeral parlor. The only family there was a half-sister. Jim told me that he caught up with Elliot a couple years back on Facebook, and Elliot shared pictures of a daughter that was in Phoenix. He showed me the pictures because she didn't make the funeral. It was a cremation, and Jim got the ashes. Chris was not able to make the funeral because he was coaching a college team. I won't say which one, but you could Google it. That was in the playoffs. They lost, and he was free the next weekend to meet us in Atkins. He told us when he arrived that he would have come anyway, win, lose, or draw. We believed him. We all met at Pat's Pub. This was the first drink we ever shared together, and we purchased a fourth that went untouched, and shared about recent successes. Chris had his team and a new contract in negotiations to secure him for the next 5 seasons. Jim had his law practice, and it kept him shaking hands with all sorts of men and women. He seemed to know everyone and have more money than he knew what to do with, so he was venturing out to other enterprises. His newest acquisition was a drive-in theater off the border of Austin that had been vacant for a decade, that he was going to renovate into a repertory location. If he had to pay out just to keep it up, and he was the only one showing up for his double features, it would be worth it to him. I shared news of my latest book deal. I had finally been accepted a year after college for the second novel I wrote. The first was utter nonsense. And the next 5 books were all published, and sold well, too. Pay was good, and I could write full-time. I still received some rejections on my short stories, but I didn't tell them that. I also told them that Rachel had just found out she was pregnant again, and we would be expecting our 4th child soon, the first girl. We made it out to the tracks 30 minutes before midnight. I was carrying the urn. It wasn't really an urn, it was a cardboard box with a plastic bag of ashes inside. And I walked over to the tree I had sat with Elliot under. I took a copy of First Blood with me, mostly for nostalgia. Jim and Chris tossed rocks. We hung out until Chris's phone alarm went off 5 minutes before midnight. We stood in the same spot we had stood in as kids, and waited. No train. We waited until 2 in the morning, maybe because we thought there might be a time delay issue. Eventually, I turned to Chris and Jim and asked them what I never had before. So, what did you all see that night?
You mean other than a ghost train?
Yeah, you know what I mean. Chris looked at Jim and went first.
I saw myself on a football field. Lights were shining down on me, and people filled the stands cheering. I saw myself just, doing what I loved. Sports, in some way or the other.
I looked at Jim. You?
I saw myself making movies.
I shook my head.
What? Yeah, I saw myself making movies, directing them and stuff.
I continued to shake my head, like a bobblehead with a loose spring. That's impossible. You're not directing movies now, right?
No.
Jim squinted at me, the cotton of his purple polo shirt being gently pushed in the wind. I saw myself writing books and having a wife and 5 kids and stuff. Now I'm doing it. I saw my future, and so did Chris, right?
Well, I don't know if I saw my future. I just saw what I loved. Like, what made me happiest at the time.
Yeah, I'd like to think I direct all the time, like in front of the jury. I tell them stories and direct them in my cases. That's why I always liked watching movies. I feel like I can use that now, telling a good story.
None of it made much sense to me. Thinking all these years that the Midnight Special was a teller of fortunes, not a mood ring, not insight into what made you happy at the time. Did any of you guys ask Elliot what he saw that night? Chris looked at Jim. Jim swallowed.
Yeah.
What was it? Jim took a deep breath and let it out slowly, like a prisoner he was reluctant to release into society. I think he knew that the longer he stalled, the longer until he had to tell us.
I asked him a couple weeks ago, brought it up. He told me he never cared much about the story until his dad passed him, and it felt like a way to honor his memory. He said he was never happier than walking with us to see the Midnight Special, but when the car pulled in front of him, he said he didn't see anything. Like, he saw the train, he saw the storage car, but inside was just nothing. I mean, yeah, he said he saw nothing. And when we walked back, he went home and cried. He figured he just would never have anything to look forward to. Didn't help that his stepdad caught him sneaking in, drunk again, and whipped him with a telephone. Yeah, I think all those things in one night really did a number on him.
I didn't say anything for a while. I nodded along with Chris as Jim told his story. We all looked at each other and eventually decided it was time to spread the ashes. Jim did the honors, spreading them under the tree and across the tracks. I cried again, thinking that Elliot had the short end of the stick. I had heard more from Jim that past week, about the stepdad that hurt him, and it apparently was even worse when they moved away from Atkins for a new job. They lost that within a month. He drank, and then so did Elliot. He never kept work down, and neither did Elliot, and Elliot's marriage went the same as his stepdad's did. A bitter divorce and custody battle that Elliot couldn't afford. Apparently this was the real reason they linked up again. Jim just hadn't wanted to tell us they reconnected over legal services he did for free. We walked back to town, where they were all invited to stay at my house for the weekend. Saturday and Sunday were good, but that Friday night, walking back from the railroad tracks, I thought about the Midnight Special. I thought about how it was supposed to show your future, but maybe it didn't, and how dangerous it was to believe the lie that someone knew everything about you. To believe in yourself, not someone else's solution for you. Maybe I never wanted to be a writer. Maybe I never wanted 5 kids. Maybe Elliot was more than nothing. No, I knew that was true. Elliot was more than nothing. He was an old friend, and those are hard to come by. You can't make old friends. On the way back, I heard laughter. Faint, but sharp. Followed me. It still does.
getting to know myself and my priorities better, and therapy has helped me do that. And you can learn more about yourself and how to make time for those positive things in your life. So consider BetterHelp when you want to try therapy. Online therapy that's convenient for your schedule, so it's easy to look after your mental health. Just fill out the questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist suited to your needs. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/nosleep today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/nosleep. Thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode. Now, back to the campfire. You've trained your whole life for this last story. In our final tale, we visit a graveyard. But this is no ordinary graveyard, because the bodies buried there aren't ones formerly of flesh and blood. No, they were once frames of steel and iron. That's right. It's a graveyard of old train cars. And in this tale, shared with us by author Seth Borgen, we'll meet Ginny and her friends as they stumble upon this mysterious place and learn about the train formerly known as the Iron Baron, a train that still holds secrets and horrors of the past. Performing this tale are Jessica McAvoy, Nick Wingert, Jeff Clement, Peter Lewis, Mike Delgadio, Sarah Thomas, and Graham Rowett. So if you're out wandering, make sure you know the way. You don't want to get caught on the wrong side of the tracks.
In the woods behind my house, just off the trail at the first big curve, the ground disappeared.